In fact, New York is the only state that's used the toolkit, but with great success. Everybody should pay attention to that. New York's really impressive. The rest of us have just sort of borrowed from that. And all the, I've extrapolated a lot of that information. It's all on the website, on the Arch website, and the link to sustainability. For those of you who want to go back and look at some of those materials. So what we're doing, we're all at various stages of sustainability planning, and we're all doing it in very different ways, different emphasis. So this group has turned out to be, this is the way that I view it, I think among the best leaders in respite. We have really sophisticated conversations. We usually just have report-ins, and then like today, I bring in some sort of food for thought, something. I go to the literature, and if there's something we've talked about in a meeting, I go and do a little research and bring it back in a digestible form, but with citations. So if anybody wants to go back and learn more. And it's a mutually really reinforcing group. There's a lot of peer-to-peer support and a lot of peer-to-peer learning that goes on. I love this group. I learn a lot from this group. So let's just do brief introductions, just to kind of reorient everyone to who we are. I'm Susan Summers, and I've worked with Jill for about 5 years, and I started actually doing a qualitative study of those grantee projects with the toolkit. What Cassandra had started it, Cassandra Furman, and she has some caregiving responsibilities in her family. So I kind of took over, and I never left. Jill can't, Jill can't get rid of me. I'm still here. I have a sibling with a disability. 70 years ago right now, my mother was pregnant with me, and she took her other toddlers from the Midwest to the West Coast to meet her family. And my eldest brother got viral encephalitis, suffered severe brain damage. He has severe disabilities. Oh, hi, Yuda. Yuda's joining us. And he is still alive. He had a stroke a couple of years ago. So we've been caregiving in our family for a full 70 years. And caregiving is more intense now. And my younger brother has been doing it 24/7 for 32 years. So respite's personally really important to me, and the work that you all do is personally really important to me. So thank you for that. And then I worked in academics for a long time, and I'm a ethnographic researcher. So I taught qualitative research. So I have that kind of that hat on too. And I first met Jill, although we didn't remember it, when I I left my doctoral program, took a leave, and directed a crisis nursery respite program. And so we had met decades ago in Washington, DC. And then when we were driving in a car together in Seattle, we kind of put our histories together and realized, oh, we sort of knew each other. So that's me. I'm here to help. And I'm just going to pass the baton to the next person who would like to introduce themselves. And Doris has joined too. Hi, Doris and Yuda.
Go ahead, since you introduced yourself and all of what this program is. So I'm Ronelle Baker. I was originally with Sooner Success. I am now officially, as of Monday, I am with the Oklahoma State Office, Oklahoma Human Services. I work under Nadine. I am now the program supervisor for Lifespan. I'm also a caregiver and have been a caregiver all my life, but I even more so now, I'm a caregiver to my child with special needs, as well as to my mother-in-law. So I'm that sandwich generation of caregiving, and I am very pleased to be here and to learn from all of you.
Thanks for now. We love having that perspective too, the sandwich generation perspective. Don't be shy, jump in, whoever wants to go next.
I'm Brooke. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm Tracy Sinowitz from Alabama Lifespan Respite Coalition. I'm the Sustainability Director, and this is my 3rd year with Respite, but I've worked with UCP Huntsville, our parent organization, for 14 years in development and fundraising and sustainability and mopping the floors and doing everything they need me to do. So I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Tracy.
I'm Brooke Bartholomew. I'm the executive director of DEEP, which is a nonprofit organization that administers the Lifespan Respite Voucher Program here in Montana. I'm also the lead of sustainability and trying to get funding into our state budget for Lifespan Respite. I've been in the DD field for several years, and we have a strong partnership with our Department of Public Health and Human Services, but the money's tight over here, they keep saying, and as it is everywhere, but need to do the work, and it's been really rewarding and fun.
Thanks, Brooke.
I'm sorry I'm late. Dina emailed me like, where are you?
We're just glad you're here.
We got off one call and I started working on a report and forgot, sorry. Doris Green, New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition.
Thanks, Doris.
Dina Prest. I'm with the New York State Office for Aging, project lead for Lifespan Respite, but I also oversee our National Family Caregiver Support Program for our 59 area agencies on aging and work very closely with the coalition, of course.
Thanks, Dina.
I'm Jutta Ulrich. I'm with the Arizona Caregiver Coalition, and we manage the Lifespan Respite program for the state of Arizona.
Thanks, Jutta.
Hi, this is Abby Lavazzo. I work closely with Dina and Doris at the New York State Office for the Aging.
Hi, Abby. Nicholas, are you there?
I'm here.
There you go.
I was just making sure to get all the ladies first. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm a gentleman.
Okay.
Nicholas Julian, Executive Director with the South Carolina Respite Coalition.
Thanks, Nicholas, who has the grooviest screen. I think you have to like teach us all to do that so we can look official in our bedrooms and Zooming. Thank you all very much. I put together a little something before we go around and have a report in, and I sent it out yesterday. And it's on respite systems, shared leadership and collaboration. We've talked about the shared leadership a number of times. And this is what I think about this. I think that we all sort of practice this intentionally or unintentionally. This is sort of more of a reminder of what we already know. But, you know, when you're in a partnership, or here's a great example, because Renelle is in a new role. So we need to articulate this in writing for proposals and with one another in our work relationships and in our businesses. So I found a couple good resources. This first one was from Forbes about bye-bye heroic leadership. And as I mentioned, so like I'm 70 years, so I lived during the Mad Men days. No offense, Nicholas, but there was really a male in charge and heroic. And a good example of that, before I was educated and I worked in a bank, I was promoted several times, but they told me I wouldn't get a raise because my husband already made enough money. True story. So we're way past that, but I found this article and it was really fascinating to me because of this quote. Leadership is not defined by the exercise of power, but by the capacity to increase the sense of power among those led. The most essential work of the leader is to create more leaders. And that was a quote from Mary Parker Follett in her book in 1924, which was astounding to me. But I also really believe this is true, and I've mentioned in this group before, we've seen some of the strongest coalitions go by the wayside when a strong leader left, because that strong leader was the only one leading. The leadership wasn't shared. And so, and we have the opposite examples of that in this group. We see New York with partners showing up together, and that's like really a wonderful thing. Alabama is another example that went through a big transition, and that there was so much strong dispersed leadership that the state remained really strong. So the second part of the handout talks about shared leadership and its implications for nonprofit leadership. And although nonprofit doesn't map on perfectly with what we all do, I think it's the closest thing. And so these just different types of leadership are ways to think about leadership. So the collective leadership is with diverse groups, broad community engagement for integrated solutions to community concerns. And I think about this when we begin with sustainability planning, we talk about needs assessment and problem scoping. And so New York might be a good example of this. You have this diverse group that comes together that identifies what the issues are. So they're invested from the very beginning on the, and they've identified it comes from their experience and their knowledge. And so they're involved in the decision-making from the very beginning. And then distributed leadership doesn't usually apply to us because that means like it's all sort of at the lower levels. And they use an example of a principal in the school and all the decision-making is dispersed to teachers and other staff. But where this does apply for us, I think it has been during COVID when our funders have allowed great flexibility in how the funds are used in delivery of programs. And that was a really wise choice, I think, for the funders to rely on all of your knowledge of what's going on and what your needs were and allowing you to make the decisions accordingly. And then the connective leadership process of bringing divergent and conflicting perspectives and approaches together to create new understanding and approaches to community concerns. And so I think this really applies to underserved populations. An example that came to my mind was Washington State that did a partnership with tribes to bring respite to caregivers and make it culturally sensitive and culturally appropriate. And they weren't successful the first go around. And so they changed the structure of shared leadership and then met with great success in their second attempts. So these are different styles, I think, that can be applied in different settings. Then collaborative leadership, this again is really similar to what New York is doing. It's not the leader's job to decide what to do and then tell the group. Rather, the group considers the problem, decides what to do, and counts on the leader to help them focus their effort. So in New York and the sustainability planning, they've hired a very skilled facilitator. They have a group of leaders represented here. They bring people over from all over the state who give guidance, give perspective. The leaders listen to it, and then they act accordingly. And then finally, network leadership that focused on grassroots efforts to build capacity and collaboration in addressing community or organizational issues. These are coalitions. It's a classic definition of a coalition. So again, just when you're thinking or writing about this or communicating, these are little resources you can go to. And then things to consider when sharing leadership within and across programs or agencies. Again, you do these, I think, intentionally and unintentionally. And we want to be more intentional about it and really be intentional about communicating with what we do. It keeps us honest and it keeps us on track. So who should be at the table? Look to your vision, mission, and goals to know who should be included. This is all maps onto the sustainability planning in the toolkit too. How are decisions made? Do you discuss? Do you reach a consensus? Do you have a majority vote? And that might be different for different parts of your work. Roles and responsibilities. This is classic for grant writing, work tasks, meeting participation, review and approval of written work, documenting work, collecting and reviewing data. This was a real stumbling block for some of the original grantees who had partnerships that they needed to negotiate, renegotiate. Things came up and they didn't really have a clear decision-making process and it presented a problem. So that's a really important one. Sharing resources, about the amount of and how you document space, equipment, time, and money. Think about how communication occurs, meeting frequency, agenda setting, access to meetings, who has access and who feels bad because they don't have access. Planning, how often, whom, when is facilitation needed. Performance evaluation. This is something we don't always think about in terms of leadership, but it's really important in the literature to think about what data do you need? How do you collect it? Who collects it? When is it needed according to purpose? To document the process, to make decisions, to improve quality, accountability for internal resource accounting, informing and educating, advocating for resources, accountability for funders. Alabama has just been stellar at this in terms of advocating, using their data to advocate and to inform. That brings me to a little announcement. Those of you who aren't on the performance measurements collaborative, there's a learning collaborative for performance measurement. I wanted to call your attention to the June 3rd meeting. And if you aren't on that group, we'll just send out an announcement to everybody in this group so they can know about it. But that's a very good group. And I think it's really important for those of us, like Brooke mentioned, she's looking to diversify funding. If you want to convince people, you need data to do that. So, I mean, I think everything we do here is supported by good performance measurement. So we'll send out a notice to that, but just keep your eyes open. I believe, Jill, am I right that Massachusetts is going to present at that one?
Yes, Leanne from our very own sustainability group is actually going to be talking about how they've evaluated their collaborative relationships. So I think that would be especially relevant to all of you.
Yeah. So that's key for us.
She was supposed to be, she said she was going to join by phone today, but I don't see her number.
Yeah, sometimes she hops in late and she's often driving. And then the last thing, aligning values among leaders. So those of you who come from different perspectives, just making your values known about diversity and inclusivity, sorry, I've got the braces, I can't talk, confidentiality, intellectual property. And something came up during, we're doing interviews with for innovative and exemplary practice. And one of the things that we look for is the inclusiveness of caregivers on boards. And we come across really excellent programs that still don't have great representation of caregivers on their boards, because I think they don't know how to do it. And so one of the things about leadership and shared leadership, I don't think Cheryl's on this phone call today, but she talks about mom power. It's really important to have the caregiver voice. I mean, we're missing out power-wise if we don't have strong caregivers advocating and supporting them in their advocacy. So that's my little leadership spiel. And that's it for me. And now let's just have a kind of report in and hear what you all are doing. A little update.
And or a reaction to everything Susan just
And/or,
did.
yeah, of course. Was it familiar to all of you? Are you like thinking and doing these things? Anything new in there?
I think it was just a good reminder for me. You know, I stepped into some big leadership shoes when I came on, and our leadership styles are night and day, it sounds like. And so we have seen some just changes in, and I don't know that it's necessarily me because there is an executive committee, but just the idea of trying to get other leaders to also show that leadership too. That it's not just the executive committee of the coalition that does all the work and takes the lead, but we really need to encourage leadership across coalition members as a whole, because we all have different strengths.
Right, right. And we're missing out on all those resources and all those good ideas. It's not as easy as it sounds, though, I think, for meaningful engagement. I may have told you the story before, but when we passed the legislation, when the federal legislation passed for early childhood, and there was a strong mandate for including parents of children with disabilities on the state board. And so there was a huge room with the conference tables around. And one of the smart things we did was provide respite for caregivers and provide transportation for them. But then we had all these state executives and university types and speaking like jargon, like a lot of jargon in early childhood. So there was a bell in front of everybody's seat, and you were like, you rang it when you didn't understand something, and it changed. And there was so much laughter around it, but it changed the way everybody spoke with one another. And so it was like this kind of cute little gimmick, but it changed the dynamics really quite a bit. So that was one little example I have. Other people, what are your other reactions? Do you feel good about what you're doing, or there's things that you want to work on leadership wise?
Susan, this is Dina. I guess I just would like to share that I guess, you know, as even though I introduced myself as kind of project lead for Lifespan Respite because NYSOFA is the applicant technically, you know, for the grant, we've always structured ourselves and we call ourselves the core team. That includes NYSOFA staff, both from, you know, in my position on the caregiver support program side, but also Abby works with me on caregiver support, but she also has a role in our No Wrong Door New York Connects program, which is, you know, a required partner. And then the coalition being housed at Lifespan, you know, so we, in how we apply for the funds and how we operate the grant, you know, I feel like we're all in these leadership roles, but that we're, you know, having ongoing conversations and having to make decisions and adjustments, you know, as we move through the work. And so I guess, you know, until you kind of like framed it the way that you did, you know, I guess it resonated for me of like, yeah, well, we kind of, you know, operate that way on an ongoing basis of you know, us just taking on this leadership in a team manner.
Yeah, and I can really see that when I read about your work or watch your webinars. I can see the strength of that. But I'm wondering, so do you meet kind of ad hoc, or has this developed over time? Have you found ways that make it work, the communication and decision making work?
Yeah, well, it's been structured like this from 2010. Our very first grant was before I came into the picture. I've been now involved, I think, 5 years. And Doris, I think you came on board like 2016. So there were previous leaders. But we actually hold, I say biweekly, but it's really not. We do, for those months that have 5 weeks, we meet twice a month. So pretty much every other Tuesday, we have a standing meeting, and what we do now is we kind of hold one of those meetings, the second meeting of the month, and we each kind of share agenda items that we want included. And then the first meeting of the month, we actually use our tracking log and discuss everything that occurred for the previous month to see, you know, how things are progressing and if we need to make any sort of adjustments, and just so we're all kind of in the know, right? Because obviously Doris is out there on the ground, and, you know, of course she'll reach out to me if needed in between as well, but it kind of just keeps us all accountable, and we're able to kind of know if anyone was to come to us and be like, what's going on in this area, or something comes up and we're like, oh, hey, hang on, the coalition's doing this. I just think it just works great for us, of, you know, on a continuous basis, for sure.
And what I hear you saying just reminds me of things like, so you set the agenda together. You have an open door, open phone policy, so everybody knows what's going on. And I've seen partners before that didn't communicate, and like one partner be really angry because somebody's kind of gone off and done something and not kept informed. So the structure that you have prevents that. And the other thing I think it does, I know when we have our ARCH staff meetings, my husband always says, I just hear you all laughing in there. So it just reminds you how lucky you are to have good coworkers, right? You know, it helps you feel kind of grateful and bond with your colleagues. So, and that's really important because it's hard work if you don't have that.
Yeah, the other thing,
and I'll say
though,
we
is-
step in for each other too, right? Like Doris yesterday, I mean, we all had like adjustments this week in particular. I think Doris had a conflict for presenting or doing something and introducing a speaker, and Abby had her second vaccine shot and felt ill. She was supposed to fill in for Doris, so then then the baton got passed to me, but we all kind of cover each other too, which is nice.
Yeah, really important.
The other thing is we're in constant contact because we're we're working on multiple projects together. So we have each other on speed dial and text and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I definitely communicate with Dina and Abby multiple times in a week. So it's not just 2 times a month. It's just constant ongoing working together.
Makes me wonder when I hear you talk, like the original setup, like Dina, you were saying that your predecessors set this up before then. They must have been really lucky or insightful, because the structure, from what I've observed, has worked really well in New York for growth and expansion. I see that you doing that.
But I would say that Dina's leadership at the state level has been key in the growth of the coalition, because the leadership before Dina wasn't that strong.
Okay.
And I think that the coalition director felt like she was more kind of out there on her own. And I certainly don't
Okay.
feel that way.
Okay, interesting.
Oh, Doris, you made my weekend.
Oh, good.
So you're saying the coalition feels more a partner now, a true partner.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. Good. Anyone else have thoughts about leadership and what you're doing and what you'd like to do that you're not doing?
For those of you that represent coalitions or represent the state, do you have similar situation for communicating between coalition members and the state lead? Very involved.
I can speak to that. So for here in Oklahoma, we do. Our coalition.
You've been on the coalition side and the state side now.
I have, and I mean, the partnership is extremely strong. And even when we do meet, we meet quarterly through the year for the statewide coalition. But we have subcommittees, and those subcommittees are very, very active. And just like New York was stating, I mean, it's not just oh, hey, our coalition meeting's coming up. Let's chat real quick before it. No, we're talking all year long, constantly. We each, if we can, fill in the gaps for one another of whatever is missing for our family caregivers and stuff. And I was very impressed with that as I had moved into Sooner Success, seeing that connectivity between all these partnerships, whether it's for children or adults, just statewide, we all have each other's phone numbers, email addresses, and we communicate with one another very, very, very well.
So Ronell, one of the things I've wondered about, or just sort of remarked upon to myself in Oklahoma, is those subcommittees. Because I've always thought that maybe the investment with one another and in respite is so strong because people have meaningful roles.
Absolutely, because it's not, you choose to be on a subcommittee. We're not forcing anyone. It's a choice. Hey, we each have our own abilities, but let's put those abilities together and be an even stronger partner. So where one can do something, the other can do another. We just bring those talents together, and that's what creates it. And it also flows right into our conference that we do every year. Because I do know, I can speak to that. When we have our conference, those committee partners, those subcommittee partners are largely active also in planning the conference, and the ones that step up to. So say like with ARP, I haven't done ARP work, but they have things for like workforce, caregivers in the workforce, they know that area. And so they're a strong partner to say, hey, can you get a special speaker for this, or, whatever it may be. I'm a parent with a child disability, and also my mother-in-law. So, hey, let's reach out to sandwich caregivers. Oh, that's me. We just have these unique abilities, and we bring them together.
Yeah. And you feel like you're making a contribution when you go to the meeting. I mean, I think that's
absolutely
important for everyone to feel like
yes.
to really be a part and not just an observer.
Right. And I think in this role now, Nadine is, I think a lot of you know Nadine, she is amazing. And I think it is that collaborative leadership already. It's only my first weekend, but it feels completely collaborative.
Yeah.
Here's what your strengths are, Ronell. Here's what we need to do. Here's what I'll do. I was talking to Jill about that already. It's not I'm just doing one thing and she's off doing her own thing. No, it's a collaboration and working together.
Yeah.
So I feel like I transitioned right into that from Sooner Success to this, just the same.
Yeah. She's been a really strong contributor to this group. So we think the world of her, and tell her we want to see her face every now and then. Would you?
I will tell her.
Okay.
She's super busy this week.
I
and-
know.
Oh man. And,
She is. She's productive. That woman.
oh, that was
But-
an understatement.
Yeah.
So I will let her know.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else have any thoughts on leadership before we just go to our report in? Okay, let's hear what you're all up to. Last week we heard about Brooke was talking about online training posts being posted soon. Dina talked about consumer-directed respite, expanding the model. Doris and Nicholas both talked about grassroots advocacy for legislative change, marketing, and capital fundraising. So any updates on those? Anything else?
I'm not, this is Tracy with Alabama Respite. I'm not sure if I have told y'all about I can't remember. I'm so sorry.
No problem. These are COVID days. You don't have to remember. Again.
Our caregiver wellness initiative. We've secured funding from, we have a little bit of our lifespan respite money, but we've secured grants from state partners to provide free mental health counseling to our caregivers. And so far, it's been a great success. We launched it just a couple of months ago, and we've had a great response to it. We have a lot of caregivers receiving that mental health assistance now, and we've created a statewide list of available licensed counselors that can meet either in person or through teletherapy with individuals, or they can choose a provider, on their own, not on the list, just as long as they accept direct pay. So we initially pay for 3 sessions, and then after 3 sessions, if the provider and the caregiver mutually agree that they would benefit from more counseling, then we just approve them in 3 session stipends. And like I said, it's all direct pay. And also, if the caregivers are, prefer to do teletherapy but don't have the technology to do so, we're also able to provide them with a tablet. And so, like I said, so far it's been a great success, and we're really excited about it.
I'm really excited about this one too. And we've talked in this group and across the Respite Network about how COVID's changed our thinking about respite services, and we also speculated on what respite might look like, or how some of the adaptations and alternatives we use may influence what we do in the future. So I think this is a good example of that. So how did the idea come about, Tracy? Like where did this come from, and what kind of funding did you use, and how do you know how it's working?
Yeah. So last year we were, while we were in quarantine, and we had, our staff working from home, and we made a lot of calls to caregivers. We made over 700 calls to our caregivers and just said, how are you? What can we do for you? What can we help you with?
Mhm.
And just from those one-on-one conversations, all of our staff who was having those conversations with the caregivers noted a great need for mental health assistance. And so that it was just organically born from that. So we started, the process and looking, seeing other agencies who, if they were already doing something similar, if this service was something already available to caregivers in our state. And we only found a couple of diagnosis specific agencies that were offering that. And one of them happened to be on our coalition. So we had conversations with them and said, what were the successes? What were the pitfalls? What advice would you give? And they were very helpful. And they said, oh, if we had it to do over, trust me, we would have made it a much simpler process. So we were very glad for that advice and kind of followed their lead there. And they also said we would be direct pay. We would not get in the middle of patient intake, so they had a lot of experience and we were, glad, like I said, to talk with them about that. So it was good timing, and that's when we were writing for our lifespan respite grant. So we were able to write that in as part of our emergency respite, because a lot of times too, our emergency respite dollars are available to caregivers who are in a mental health crisis. If they call us and they say, I am at my breaking point and I have to step away from this caregiving role before something happens, then we make those emergency respite funds available. So we rolled it into that funding, and then we started writing grants, and we started, like I said, we called it the Caregiver Wellness Initiative, to expand our respite funds, to create new funds specifically for the mental health counseling. And then we further supported that initiative with care chats, which are one-on-one conversations with the caregivers. And then our monthly support group, which has all gone virtual now and has been really great being virtual, because we are statewide instead of doing pockets of groups around the state. Now we have one big one, and caregivers from all over the state have gotten to meet each other, and they've been very happy about that. But anyway, so some soft things we have done to further support the Caregiver Wellness Initiative, plus increased caregiver mental health education offerings in our trainings. So all of that bundled up is the Caregiver Wellness Initiative, and that's how we wrote it in our grants. And so we had two supporters come in, the Daniel Foundation of Alabama and the Venturi Broader Day Foundation, who further supported that. So we've had $35,000 this year that we're able to offer to caregivers, just specifically for the mental health stipends. And they're not required, but each caregiver is asked pre-counseling and then post-counseling to take a test or take a survey online. And it's a stress level test, and it's a nationally recognized one that was shared with us by our funder through Alabama Department of Senior Services. And so they take the test before and take the test after, and that's how we're tracking whether the counseling has been successful or not.
Okay, great. And do you have any measures to know, or any sort of sense? I don't know what measures you would have, but a lot of people are using technology for like support groups. And do you have a sense of how well those are working, or?
Yeah, I just sent out a survey. It was Monday, sent out a survey asking, our caregivers, not just about the support group, but all of our online efforts with education and things. Are you doing more or less during the pandemic? What has worked best for you, pre-recorded or live via Zoom? When it's safe to get back out in the community, will you go out into those on-site education opportunities again in person, or would you prefer to keep going online? And we've already had a big response to the survey just in a week, and 80% so far have said we'd like to continue virtually. We'd like to keep going online, because it's so hard to step away from a caregiving role and go out on site, into the community. And before COVID, I may not have mentioned this, we weren't doing any online, because we hadn't asked them before if they wanted online, but the assumption was that they might not have the technology. We serve so many caregivers in rural areas. They might not have the internet accessibility, but we were wrong. Our participation and our education has grown tremendously over the past year. And right now, like I said, the survey is indicating that as far as support groups and education, they do want to continue to meet virtually.
Well, this is breaking news. This is really great. So I hope when you get the survey results, you'll share them with us.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, do you participate in the performance measurement learning collaborative?
Yes, Cheryl usually does it more than I do, but yes.
Okay, because they're going to want to know what you're up to.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a good report and an excellent case study of how that process evolved, and to the point of actually having useful data that's going to be useful for the whole respite network. So good on you. That was great. Thank you. Okay, what are others up to? Sustainability wise.
I can go next. Jutta from Arizona. We are with the new Lifespan Respite Grant, we are trying to focus really more on capacity building rather than just providing more respite.
Mhm.
And so we have, for about a year now, we've had regular meetings of a respite committee, as we're calling it. So I'm with the Caregiver Coalition, which has been around a number of years. And so with the state, we're working on building this respite coalition. We have pretty good participation. It's, it's off and on, people are busy. So we have the area agencies, we have the VA, we have DDD and some providers. What we're still working on is a little bit bridging this from being only the Lifespan Respite Grant Committee, if that makes sense, to really wanting, at least it's my vision, and I hope it's the state's vision, to being the state's respite committee, if not coalition, and where we're really building capacity. Just to give you one tiny example of what one of the issues is. So we have 8 area agencies for the state, and only 4 of them get any funding from the Lifespan Respite Grant for day center respite. Okay, and then other activities like our voucher is done through the coalition that I'm with. And so one of the small area agencies, the Family Caregiver Support Coordinator, said to me like a few weeks ago when I finally got a hold of her, she said, well, my director pulled me out of the coalition because we're not part of your grant. And so I was a little stumped by that, and I realized we somehow, so between the state and me, we need to improve our communication. This is not just about the grant money, right? This is really the bigger effort and to build the state's capacity. So that's kind of an issue where we're at. We are actually doing some projects, and so we've identified 2 things that everybody wants to work on with so far, again, and I'm listening very closely to what you're all saying about the subcommittees. Right now, all the work is landing in my coalition, where I'm really limited to like interns and volunteers largely, right? But the 2 things we're working on, one is emergency respite, and we're trying to create a little toolkit, right? And then our plan is, we've applied for an AmeriCare grant. We hope, of course, to get it. But one of the activities will hopefully be to work one-on-one with family caregivers to pull together this toolkit so that people are prepared for emergencies, right? Because even now, I mean, you all know this too. We get calls, hey, I'm gonna go to the hospital tomorrow. Who is gonna come and take care of my mom, right? Of course, by then it's too late, almost. And so we're trying to create this toolkit and work with caregivers to be prepared to build relationships with day centers or assisted living facilities or home care agencies in advance. So that's one big project. The other one we're looking at, and the state actually has given us formal permission for a small pilot through the Lifespan Respite Grant, is to explore unlicensed day programs. Okay. So I'd like to hear how everybody else is doing that. But right now, at the Arizona Family Caregiving programs through the state are limited to licensed day health centers, and we only have 15 in the state and 12 of them in Maricopa County in the Phoenix area, right? And the rest of the state has nothing. And so we have permission to explore what other day programs, day clubs are there. Can we come up with some criteria to vet them and use some Lifespan Respite Grant money to potentially fund respite? And then the long-term goal would be, if this works, that maybe eventually the state would change its policies to allow area agencies to do that too.
Right, so you definitely want to measure that, what's going on, so that you can give that information to the state about safety and
Right.
efficacy and, any other issues that come up. Wow, you're busy. You've been really busy.
Yep.
You just in a state that did have a gap in leadership, so she came in to a state, just this relates to what we were talking about earlier, that there wasn't a smooth transition for leadership. So you came in and have had to rebuild. I think that's.
Yes.
That's
Yes, very, very, very much. And Arizona has a lot to offer. Okay. And I always want to emphasize that the area agencies, AARP, and several other organizations, faith-based groups, we have a lot. We have tons of support groups, tons of classes. In fact, everybody was making so many calls to caregivers that I stopped my volunteers because caregivers were saying, I've already had 2 calls. Okay. I don't need another call. So, which is very good, right? That there's so much going on. But because, as you said, Susan, because there wasn't a strong coalition, the area agencies have sort of, and others have filled in the space, and we're trying to reestablish, who we are and our role as coordinating and improving collaboration.
Yeah. So you've got some good models in this group about strong coalitions. So, you can reach out. I mean, I love the Oklahoma example of the lunch and learns and their subcommittees, and getting the people in the coalition so they know it's not just about the grant. It's not just getting money from a grant, but recognizing the wealth of talent and experience that you have among those people, and figuring out how to put them to use to educate, inform, support respite throughout the state. So it's fun, but it's big what you're doing. That was a great report. Thanks. Who else would like to just update us on what's going on in your neck of the woods?
So New York just did their final piece of the toolkit. That was April 1st and 2nd. I was hoping to have those documents to share with you, but our facilitator has not sent me the final documents yet. But it was a good and exhausting process. Jump in anytime, Dina. Or Abby. We updated our SWOT analysis as kind of a way to start because the landscape has changed so significantly since COVID. And we really worked on our financing strategies. So, we'll have that. We're going to get it just in time to work on our ISBA presentation because sustainability is a big part of our presentation. So we're excited to have that information for that. One of the other big things that we're undertaking is we put it as a piece of our planning in year 1, and it's really looking at, and Yuta, you talked about emergency respite, really looking at how we can get caregivers to plan in advance for respite. And we looked at a partnership years ago. I started a program called Future Care Planning Services, and it mostly focuses on helping caregivers of adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities do legal and financial planning for their loved one. And we thought that with that program continues to be very strong, and during COVID, they thought it would kind of fall off. But the planning, people started thinking about, oh my God, what if I get COVID? What's going to happen? I don't have. And so they ended up with a wait list for their services during COVID. So we wanted to really, and they pivoted to virtual. So we really wanted to develop a program that would talk about caregivers or help caregivers across the lifespan and using that planning model from Future Care. So we reached out to a local foundation and we put in for a great big grant to develop an online platform like caregiver.com has. I think it's caregiver.com to develop this online planning platform where we could also integrate this really strong human component and a hand holding for helping caregivers get through the planning process, because we know that without the hand holding, it doesn't get done. So the foundation was like, well, there's other things out there. There's planning platforms already. So they connected us. Dina, I haven't even told you this yet because we did it this week. They connected us with a for-profit company called Caring Wire, and they said, we'll give you money to figure out if you can bring these two great ideas together. So it's a merger. We're exploring kind of a merger between for-profit and non-for-profit. I think it's a huge undertaking. We've hired a powerhouse facilitator to try and help us get through that. We wrote her into the grant with the foundation because she's a known entity to them, and I have seen her in action. So we started that process this week, and who knows where it could go, but ultimately, if it were able to come to fruition, it would be able to, I think Caring Wire looks at it as a national program. We look at it as a state program, but how could we use what they have on their for-profit side and what we know and our connections and our networking in the non-for-profit community, if we can really get caregivers to think about planning and include this respite component, this emergency respite component.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
It's kind of mind-blowing,
Yeah.
actually.
So did you say this is the future care planning services? Would that be applicable to what Yuta is doing in terms of emergency, or there's some things that she could borrow from that, or is it?
It's Yuta, the website is futurecareplanning.org.
Okay.
And we developed years ago a 4-step planning process that walks the caregiver through a letter of intent, which is a history and of the care receiver, hopes, dreams, all that stuff. It's very inclusive. It includes the person with the disability. And then really looking at legal and financial and respite options for them.
Yeah.
And
I think-
developing a
yeah.
written plan. And then the unique part of that program is a 2-year follow-up with 3, 6, 12, 18, and 24 months, calling them saying, hey, it's us. Have you accomplished this? Kind of just nudging them along the way.
Yeah,
We
no,
have
I-
great
I'm-
outcomes for that program. We have great data. So we're really hoping that something really unique and innovative will come out of it.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to look at that. And I think our DD Planning Council has something similar. I wonder if they even are using that, if it's a state, nationwide. I was going to ask you something else. You mentioned this for-profit effort. And so here again in Arizona, I get regular calls, or I know about people, I guess, who I think they call themselves care managers. You know, there's people who help people for usually a pretty high hourly fee to either, get care, or sometimes they send them, send somebody with them to a doctor's appointment.
Right.
Is anybody looking at that? I mean, that's really pricey. Okay. I'm hearing like hourly cost of $100 or more. So most
it's
people
higher.
can't afford that. But is there some way, again, we can piggyback on that, or give grants, or work with them to maybe have a scale for people who can't pay that much? Or
Well, geriatric care manager is pretty huge, but that is for profit, and Caring Wire is for profit, but we're so early in this process, I don't even know what their pricing structure is. That's something that I've identified for our facilitator to try and help us come through that. It's fascinating because when we wrote up the first proposal, the for-profit did a budget, and they put it in their budget that their time was worth more than our time hourly. And I thought, oh, we have a whole big culture problem here. It's going to be an amazing thing. And really, it's just, they gave us a grant to explore to see if it could be done. So, that's where we are. And, partnering with for-profit agencies, I think we do it all the time with contracts with day programs and stuff, programs that can provide respite. But I don't know. I don't know. It's going to be quite the journey.
Thank you. You know, we're kind of down to the wire here, but Brooke and Nicholas, do you have any updates about what you're doing? And sorry that we have so few minutes left, but we can stay over too if anybody wants to do that. Brooke, anything new?
I can just give a brief update. We were able to post those online trainings
Oh,
on
that's
our
good.
Facebook page
Yes.
and our YouTube page. We're really excited about those. And then we've been thinking about we should probably try to do something for caregivers as well, of how to hire a caregiver or a respite provider, what trainings they might need, and we're really excited to expand our trainings that we're offering on our website. Very similar to care.com. We've been doing some interviews of caregivers, and they're all saying that they use care.com for finding their respite provider. So we're really excited to try to create our free version of care.com for caregivers to access and find a respite provider in their area. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else. We are gearing up to do a summit. We've talked about that a little bit. We're going to do a virtual summit, I believe, in June. So that's exciting, with the goal to try to get more coalition members excited about respite and just focus on that sustainability, but find something amazing and educational like Jill to come in and talk and get coalition members who maybe kind of bored of the coalition. We've had a lot of turnover too of coalition members and new people in those places, but hoping the summit will encourage and reactivate participation in our coalition. So we have begun the plannings of that.
That's exciting. So maybe next month, New York could bring some information from their last planning session. And then in June, maybe Brooke, you could kind of talk about what's going on summit-wise, do a little mini presentation. We'll give New York a chance to do a dry run for ISBA.
Thanks.
And Nicholas, hop in and tell us, you're more recent to your job, but like what's going on there? What's your new life like, respite wise?
Sure. So pulling back from some stuff to kind of just reevaluate some things and really focus in on maybe building up a little bit of reserve fund and evaluating maybe some in-house programs that we might be able to develop. With everything being drawdown and reimbursement, that makes me nervous from a business perspective. So I'd like to have a little something in the reserve fund. So kind of focusing on that. And then we're maintaining our state committee on respite, our regional committees, and then our subcommittees within there. And from some preliminary talks and stuff, we were focusing on emergency respite vouchers, but it seems very consistent across the board that availability of providers is a big gap for us. So kind of looking into that a little bit. I recently acquired a new database system to handle our Department of Disability and Special Needs contract. And within that platform, we have an ability to dispatch and have providers. So looking at possibly doing a volunteer respite provider program that we would utilize for, as opposed to emergency respite vouchers, it would be emergency respite volunteers. And within that software program, you have the ability to set all kinds of parameters, certifications. You can, mobile app tracks time, they can clock in, clock out. There's all kinds of really neat features with that. So trying to see if we can kind of take both of those things, combine them into one and fill some gaps with that. Other than that, business as usual.
Well, those are huge things. So I've been kind of going easy on you. I just think, just let him get his feet on the ground. But like I said last week, you've hit the ground running. So we want to spend more time with you. Maybe we've got May and June kind of booked, but you're talking about building your reserve funds. We don't talk much about diversification of funding in this group, and I think there are relatively few states that in the respite network that have done a really good job, and South Carolina has been one of the leaders in that. So that would be great information to bring more to the group, and I'm really interested in this database that you're using. and you're looking at emergency respite volunteers and you made a statement about using your software program. And so we'd like to hear more about how you use that, how you apply data to making decisions and where you're going to go with that. And yeah, so we're going to tap you for more information in the future, like a lot more information, if you're willing.
Yeah, I'll be hanging around.
Good. We'll be hanging around too. So this is wonderful as usual. We went a little bit over. Any parting thoughts, anyone?
Susan, if you don't mind, I just wanted to alert everyone to a really wonderful report that Susan just finished drafting. And I have not had time to disseminate it widely, but it's called In Support of Caregivers, Key Accomplishments of Lifespan Respite Grantees. And many of you reviewed your little blurbs on your special efforts, like Tracy. We did feature the Wellness Project in Alabama. Many of the things that you've talked about today, we've been able to feature. This document, I think, is going to be very useful for us nationally on the policy front for advocating for the Lifespan Respite Program broadly. But I think it might be very helpful to all of you too, who are seeking funding or coalition support or whatever you might need it for, to show that you are featured in this document of states that have a lifespan respite best practice.
Yeah.
So I wanted to call your attention to that, and hopefully I'll get it. It is on the website now, but I haven't disseminated it as widely as I would like, but hopefully by Monday, you'll have a link to it in your inboxes, and I just wanted to alert you to that.
So your work in that document is really wonderful. And I just have a little story. I did a kind of similar document way back when for the Friends child abuse prevention programs. And one of the states, the state was cutting their funding, and they took the booklet and said, you can't cut our funding. We're a good example in this document. So you can use it, I think, to educate. It's pretty, we tried to make it really user-friendly. And the work that you all have done, like when you see the array of work across the United States, it's really impressive. So good on you, on all of you. Okay, hope everybody's vaccinated, everybody stays safe and well, and we'll see you all soon. And we'll send out an announcement about the Performance Measurement Learning Collaborative too, and hope you all will join that. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Susan.
bye.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
You too.